My own sister pointed at my grease-stained hands in front of 200 wealthy wedding guests and screamed that a filthy mechanic like me had no right to ruin her high-society marriage. I was standing there in a cheap $60 suit, holding the $60,000 shop foreclosure notice I took on to fund her dream ceremony, while the groom laughed in my face. They thought throwing me out into the pouring rain was the end of my dignity, but they had no idea who was watching from the luxury resort balcony directly above us. My name is David Vance. I am 38 years old, and for 16 long years I have proudly owned a small auto repair garage on the industrial outskirts of Columbus, Ohio. When our parents died in a tragic highway crash when I was 22, I dropped out of vocational college to raise my 12-year-old sister Chloe single-handedly without ever asking for help. I spent my entire 20s working 14-hour days under rusted car frames, inhaling brake dust and oil fumes, just to keep food on our table and pay for her private tutoring. Every single dollar I earned went directly into Chloe's young life, ensuring she never felt the cold sting of poverty or missed out on school field trips or stylish warm winter clothes. She was my entire world, and I swallowed my own personal dreams of opening a bigger repair shop because making sure my little sister had a proper future was my only priority. 2 years ago, after graduating from Ohio State University with a degree in marketing, Chloe met Julian Sterling, the arrogant 30-year-old heir to a massive regional luxury resort development firm. Julian was slick, polished, and extremely wealthy, driving custom Italian sports cars, wearing tailor-made suits, and treating every hard-working service person he encountered like worthless dirt beneath his expensive designer shoes. From the very first moment Chloe brought him home to my modest 3-bedroom house, Julian made continuous snide remarks about the strong smell of engine grease and my calloused, scarred working hands. I bit my tongue and swallowed my pride every single time, quietly telling myself that if Chloe truly loved him, I would tolerate his condescending behavior for the sake of her ultimate happiness. When they got engaged 6 months ago, Chloe came into my repair shop weeping because Julian's aristocratic family insisted on an insanely opulent $60,000 wedding at the Grand Waterfront Resort downtown. She begged me to pay for the venue, catering, and flower arrangements, claiming that if we could not match his family's high standards, his mother would look down on her forever. I did not have $60,000 sitting in my personal checking account, so I went straight to the local bank and put my beloved repair shop up as primary loan collateral. The bank loan officer warned me that if I missed 3 consecutive monthly payments, they would foreclose on my business, but I signed the papers anyway to grant Chloe's urgent wish. I told myself that 2 long decades of hard sweat and physical sacrifice meant nothing compared to seeing my beloved little sister stand at the altar looking like a glowing princess. As the wedding date approached, Julian's arrogant mother insisted on managing every detail, systematically stripping away any mention of my family's humble working-class roots from the official printed wedding program. They assigned me a seat in the very back row near the loud kitchen service doors, claiming it was closer to the restrooms for my convenience, which was a blatant, deliberate lie. I bought the best suit off the rack from a local department store clearance sale, having spent my last remaining cash reserves to settle Chloe's expensive final florist invoice that morning. When I arrived at the Grand Convention Hall, the sheer luxury was suffocating, filled with over 200 wealthy corporate executives, prominent local politicians, and high society socialites covered in expensive diamonds. My rough working hands, scrubbed completely raw with heavy industrial soap, still bore stubborn dark engine grease under the fingernails that no amount of chemical scrubbing could ever fully erase. As I walked down the carpeted main corridor toward the ballroom entrance, Julian intercepted me in front of several prominent real estate investors and pointed openly at my worn leather shoes. He loudly chuckled, asking if I had just crawled out from underneath a rusty, broken garbage truck, causing his wealthy corporate friends to burst into cruel, deliberate, and humiliating public laughter. I held my head up high, quietly handed him the final receipt showing $60,000 paid in full, and told him I was just here to give my sister away. Julian snatched the receipt paper without a single word of thanks, smirked coldly, and whispered that dirty labor money could never purchase genuine class, or buy entry into his world. During the long cocktail hour, I stood alone in the back corner holding a glass of tap water, watching Chloe laugh merrily while sipping vintage champagne with Julian's snobbish mother. Not once did my sister look over toward me, nor did she introduce me to a single person as the devoted brother who had sacrificed his entire youth to raise her. She acted as if I were an invisible ghost or an uninvited staff member who had accidentally wandered into a private party reserved strictly for the rich and powerful elite. At 7 o'clock in the evening, the heavy brass doors opened, and the 200 guests took their assigned seats inside the magnificent crystal chandelier ballroom for the main ceremony. I took my assigned place in the very back row, surrounded by dirty catering staff trays, pulling out the bank notice that reminded me my first repayment was due tomorrow. Just as the wedding march music began to play softly, Julian took the microphone on the center stage, holding a thick folder in his left hand with a sinister, mocking smile. He announced to the entire room that before taking his sacred wedding vows, he needed to make a critical public declaration regarding the strict moral standards of the Sterling family name. Julian pointed his finger directly across the vast ballroom at me, causing every single wedding camera operator and high society guest to turn their heads and stare straight into my burning face. He projected his arrogant voice through the speakers, declaring that his prominent family could not tolerate a broke grease monkey mechanic dragging down their aristocratic reputation with dirty, unpayable bank debt. Julian falsely claimed he had run a secret background check and discovered that my small auto repair shop was facing imminent bank foreclosure due to my severe, desperate financial failure. He intentionally and conveniently omitted the crucial truth that the $60,000 causing my shop's imminent foreclosure was the exact money used to pay for his lavish waterfront wedding. The elite crowd gasped in shock, whispering cruel insults about how a low-class mechanic had managed to crash such an exclusive, high-society gathering of prominent local millionaires and corporate executives. I stood up from my folding chair, my heart pounding violently against my ribs, fully expecting my sister Chloe to step up to the stage microphone and tell everyone the truth. Instead, Chloe stepped forward in her white silk gown, took the microphone from Julian, and looked across the room at me with eyes completely cold and devoid of all brotherly affection. She publicly told the 200 elite guests that she was deeply ashamed of my financial poverty, my cheap suit, and the embarrassing way I lived my simple blue-collar daily existence. Chloe loudly declared to everyone that she was severing all family ties with me, effective immediately, refusing to let a broke auto mechanic tarnish her bright, wealthy future in high society circles. Julian smirked triumphantly, calling uniformed venue security guards to the front stage and ordering them to forcibly escort the grease monkey out of the resort facility before he canceled the wedding entirely. My own little sister raised her right hand, pointed directly toward the heavy emergency exit doors, and yelled for me to get out of her sight and never contact her ever again. The security guards grabbed my arms tightly, shoving me through the heavy side exit, while the wealthy guests clapped and cheered as if a dangerous pest had been safely removed forever. I stumbled out into the torrential cold night downpour, my cheap suit soaking completely through within seconds, standing totally alone in the vast, empty parking lot of the luxury resort. Rainwater mixed with hot tears on my face as I slowly walked toward my 12-year-old pickup truck, its faded red body paint and rusty rear bumper standing out like a sore thumb. I slowly climbed into the cold driver's seat, slammed the heavy truck door shut against the howling wind, and pulled out the crumpled bank mortgage papers from my soaked suit jacket pocket. $60,000 owed, my life's work about to be auctioned off on the local courthouse steps, and the little sister I raised had tossed me away like worthless disposable trash. I rested my forehead against the plastic steering wheel, my body shaking with silent, uncontrollable sobs, feeling completely broken after 16 long years of unselfish devotion and hard physical sacrifice. What neither Julian nor my sister Chloe ever realized was that while they were humiliating me inside, a distinguished elderly gentleman was standing on the private VIP balcony directly above the ballroom. That quiet man was Arthur Vance, the 72-year-old billionaire founder and majority owner of the massive international luxury hospitality chain that owned and operated the grand waterfront resort facility itself. Julian had spent 6 desperate months begging Arthur's corporate board for a massive $30 million commercial real estate development deal to save his family's struggling company from sudden, shameful bankruptcy. Arthur had specifically come to the resort incognito that evening to personally observe Julian's true character in a private social setting before deciding whether to sign that crucial multi-million-dollar contract. From the elevated VIP glass balcony, Arthur had watched the entire cruel spectacle unfold, listening carefully to every single vicious word spoken into the microphone by both Julian and my ungrateful sister. As Arthur looked down at my wet face through the heavy rain in the parking lot, his sharp eyes suddenly widened as he recognized my worn facial features with absolute complete shock. 5 years earlier, on a freezing December night on Interstate 71, a severe snowstorm caused a jackknifed tractor trailer to crush a small luxury sedan against the frozen highway steel guardrail. I was driving my shop tow truck home when I witnessed the terrible accident, stopped immediately, and pulled a trapped 19-year-old college student from the burning, twisted highway vehicle wreck. I used my heavy hydraulic rescue tools to pry open the crushed driver's side door seconds before the engine bay exploded into massive flames, saving her young life just in time. I wrapped her warm in my heavy canvas shop jacket, waited for emergency paramedics to arrive, and quietly left the scene without ever leaving my full name or taking any cash reward. That young girl was Lily Vance, Arthur's beloved only granddaughter, whom the elderly billionaire had spent 5 long years searching for across the entire state to express his deep personal gratitude. Arthur pulled out his encrypted satellite phone, dialed his personal chief executive attorney, and ordered an immediate total hold on the $30 million Sterling family contract pending a full corporate fraud audit. He then instructed his chief security officer to immediately go outside and track down the tired owner of the rusted red pickup truck sitting alone in Section C of the lower parking lot. Inside my cold truck, I turned the ignition key, the old V8 engine coughing to life, preparing to drive back to my empty garage and face the grim reality of total bankruptcy. Suddenly, a sleek, black armored luxury SUV pulled up directly behind my rear bumper, blocking my path out of the parking space, its high beams illuminating the heavy, freezing night downpour. A tall man in a dark tailored trench coat stepped out into the rain, holding a large black golf umbrella, and knocked politely on my driver's side window with a firm, steady hand. I rolled down the window slightly, suspecting venue security had sent someone to force me off the property grounds completely, but the tall security man smiled warmly and bowed his head. He politely informed me that Mr. Arthur Vance requested the honor of my presence upstairs in the penthouse executive suite for an urgent private meeting regarding an old debt of honor. I wiped the wet hair from my eyes, feeling deeply confused as to why the billionaire owner of the resort chain would ever want to speak with a disgraced, grease-stained auto mechanic. I followed the security director through a private service elevator directly to the top-floor penthouse suite, where floor-to-ceiling glass windows overlooked the entire lit city skyline during the heavy storm. Arthur Vance was standing by the warm fireplace, holding a framed photograph of a smiling young woman wearing a college graduation gown, holding my old canvas shop jacket in her hands. The moment Arthur saw my face clearly, tears welled up in his tired eyes, and he walked across the grand room with open arms, grasping my hand with immense respect and warmth. He told me that 5 years ago I had given his family back their most precious earthly treasure, and tonight he had witnessed the disgraceful way my kindness had been rewarded. Arthur placed his hand on my soaked shoulder, handed me a warm cup of coffee, and promised that by tomorrow morning, complete justice would be served and my shop secured forever. He tapped a red button on his executive desk, initiating a full financial investigation into the Sterling estate, marking the exact moment the tables turned completely against my arrogant betrayers. Arthur gestured toward a massive leather armchair by the fire, handing me a steaming mug of hot coffee, while his corporate legal team began gathering thick financial files on the mahogany desk. He explained that his investigative team had already spent 3 months discreetly auditing Julian's real estate development company, suspecting widespread corporate embezzlement and falsified loan applications across several state lines. Arthur clicked a remote, displaying high-definition security camera footage from the ballroom downstairs directly onto a giant flat screen, where Julian and my sister were raising champagne glasses to their wealthy guests. Seeing Chloe smiling so brightly beside the arrogant man who had just destroyed my life sent a sharp, agonizing pain straight through my chest, making my hands tremble against the porcelain cup. Arthur looked into my eyes with deep compassion, promising that the arrogance of the Sterling family was about to come to a sudden, absolute end before the midnight hour even arrived. He picked up his phone and called his chief financial officer, instructing him to immediately execute a total freeze on all pending bank loans associated with the Sterling firm's luxury resort contract. Within minutes, 2 senior forensic accountants entered the penthouse suite, carrying confidential audit reports that proved Julian's family firm was actually insolvent and facing imminent federal fraud indictments by morning. Julian had desperately needed Arthur's official signature on that $30 million development deal to pay off massive illegal offshore debts and prevent his entire family from facing immediate criminal bankruptcy proceedings. Arthur turned to me and handed me a certified bank draft for $75,000, drawn directly from his private foundation, made payable directly to my local commercial mortgage lender. He quietly declared that my small auto repair garage was now completely free of all bank debt, ensuring my hard-working future would never again be threatened by shallow, ungrateful relatives. I stared at the cashier's check in utter disbelief, tears welling in my eyes as 16 long years of crushing financial burden were erased in a single, quiet moment of true kindness. Arthur smiled warmly and said that saving his beloved granddaughter's life 5 years ago was a debt of honor that money could never truly repay, but this was only the beginning. He then instructed his personal valet to bring me a tailored charcoal designer suit from his private wardrobe, ensuring I looked like a distinguished guest before we walked downstairs together. I changed out of my soaked, cheap clearance suit, stepping into the high-end Italian fabric that fit comfortably, standing tall beside the powerful billionaire who was preparing to deliver swift justice. At 8:30 p.m., the heavy double doors of the main ballroom burst open, stopping the loud reception music as Arthur Vance walked inside, flanked by 4 uniformed private security officers and myself. The 200 wealthy high society guests immediately turned around, gasping in surprise as they recognized the legendary owner of the entire luxury resort chain standing quietly at the center aisle. Julian's arrogant mother gasped in sheer delight, instantly rushing forward to greet Arthur, assuming the powerful executive billionaire had personally arrived to celebrate her son's grand marriage into high society. Julian immediately grabbed a microphone from the bandstand, loudly announcing to the crowd that the great billionaire Arthur Vance had personally descended from his executive penthouse to honor their union. My sister Chloe smiled triumphantly, holding Julian's arm tightly while glancing toward the doorway, only to freeze in utter shock when her eyes landed squarely on my tailored suit and polished shoes. She gasped, taking a sudden step back as her face turned completely pale, unable to process how her broke mechanic brother was walking side by side with the country's most powerful billionaire. Arthur raised his hand, commanding absolute silence across the vast chandelier-lit ballroom, his deep voice echoing through the heavy speaker system with cold, unyielding authority that chilled the entire room. He stated plainly that he had come downstairs to address an urgent matter of character and corporate ethics before any business partnership could ever be finalized with the Sterling family name. Julian puffed out his chest confidently, assuring Arthur that his prestigious family maintained the highest moral standards in the entire state, completely unaware of the trap closing tightly around him. Arthur looked straight at Julian and announced to the entire room that effective immediately, the $30 million real estate development deal between their 2 companies was officially canceled and permanently dissolved. A collective gasp echoed across the 200 guests, while Julian's mother nearly collapsed onto a nearby dining table, her face draining of all color in a split second of terror. Julian stuttered frantically into the microphone, begging Arthur for an explanation, asking why such a massive commercial contract was being abruptly terminated on his joyous wedding night in front of everyone. Arthur stepped closer to the stage, pointing directly at Julian's face as he revealed that forensic corporate auditors had uncovered massive financial fraud and systemic loan forgery within the Sterling business. He publicly declared that Julian's family firm was completely bankrupt, carrying over $40 million in hidden debts, and was actively being investigated by state and federal law enforcement prosecutors. Whispers erupted like wildfire throughout the entire ballroom, as prominent local investors and wealthy politicians quickly backed away from Julian, horrified to learn they had been socializing with fraud suspects. Julian's mother began screaming at her son in front of everyone, demanding to know if the terrible allegations were true, while clutching her expensive pearl necklace in pure, uncontrollable panic. Arthur then turned his focus directly toward my younger sister Chloe, who was standing frozen on the raised wooden stage, clutching her white designer wedding gown with trembling, sweat-stained fingers. He projected his voice clearly, telling the audience how this young woman had just publicly humiliated and discarded her own brother, who had sacrificed his entire youth to raise her. Arthur revealed that the $60,000 used to fund this extravagant wedding came directly from a bank loan secured against my small auto repair garage, which I had risked for her. The high society guests glared at Chloe with intense disgust, shaking their heads in collective shame as the terrible truth of her appalling ingratitude and cold betrayal was laid completely bare. Chloe looked at me with wide, panicked eyes, the harsh reality crashing down upon her as she realized her wealthy fairy tale marriage was built entirely on a foundation of massive fraud. Julian snapped, turning furiously on Chloe and shouting into the live microphone that she was nothing but a low-class mechanic's sister who had brought absolute ruin upon his entire family name. He viciously shoved her away from him, causing her to stumble backward onto the carpeted stage, her long white wedding dress tearing as she fell hard against the wooden podium. Not a single person in the grand ballroom moved to help her up, as all 200 wealthy guests turned their backs on the disgraced couple in absolute, unanimous contempt. Arthur took the microphone again, publicly announcing that the resort had officially revoked the venue booking due to non-payment of contract fees, ordering venue security to clear the ballroom immediately. Uniformed security officers began escorting the stunned guests toward the main exits, while catering staff members immediately started clearing away the untouched luxury food plates and expensive vintage champagne glasses. Julian's mother fell to her knees on the marble floor, weeping uncontrollably as 2 county sheriff deputies walked into the room to serve formal financial seizure notices on their assets. Chloe scrambled off the floor and ran frantically toward me across the empty dance floor, tears ruining her heavy makeup as she reached out to grab my tailored suit sleeve. She sobbed hysterically, begging me to forgive her, claiming she was tricked by Julian, and that she always loved me as her devoted brother who had raised her through everything. I gently but firmly pulled my arm away from her trembling touch, looking down at my sister with a calm, quiet sorrow that held no anger, only absolute, permanent detachment. I reminded her that just 1 hour ago, she had pointed her finger at my grease-stained hands and ordered venue security to throw me out into the freezing night downpour. I told her that while I would always remember the young girl I raised with hard sweat and sacrifice, the cold woman standing before me was a complete stranger to my heart. Chloe fell to her knees on the carpet, clutching my leather shoes and pleading for me to pay off her personal wedding debts so she would not face total financial ruin. I quietly looked her in the eyes and said that her choices were now her own responsibility, turning my back on her for the very first time in my entire adult life. Arthur walked beside me as we exited the Grand Convention Center, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder as we walked out into the cool, refreshing rain outside the lobby. He informed me that his corporate fleet of over 200 commercial transport vehicles required a permanent, exclusive regional repair and maintenance contract starting at the beginning of next month. Arthur offered my small garage the exclusive multi-million-dollar service agreement, providing enough steady corporate revenue to expand my humble auto repair shop into a massive state-of-the-art commercial service center facility. In addition, Arthur revealed that his granddaughter Lily had recently graduated with honors in business management and wanted to work alongside me as my chief operational manager at the expanded shop. The very next morning, I walked into my local bank with the certified foundation check, officially paying off the shop mortgage completely and securing my life's work permanently from foreclosure. The loan officer handed me the stamped title deed to my property, smiling warmly as I held the official paperwork that represented 16 years of honest labor and quiet endurance. Over the following 3 weeks, news of the Sterling family's massive corporate collapse made big front-page headlines across the entire state as their luxury firm was forced into involuntary bankruptcy. Julian and his mother were forced to sell their private luxury vehicles and high-end estates at public court auctions to satisfy millions of dollars in outstanding bank loans and legal judgments. State prosecutors officially filed 30 formal felony fraud charges against Julian for falsifying commercial credit applications, leaving him facing a potential 10-year prison sentence in a federal correctional facility. Chloe was left completely penniless, saddled with over $40,000 in personal credit card debt from wedding planning expenses that Julian had promised to reimburse but never actually paid. She was evicted from her luxury apartment downtown, forced to take a night shift job as a waitress at a diner on the outskirts of city limits just to afford rent. Several times, Chloe tried calling my personal phone and visiting the repair garage, begging for a second chance and asking for a small loan to pay off her mounting debt. I instructed my office staff to politely inform her that all personal meetings were strictly declined, keeping my boundaries firm and refusing to allow toxic disrespect back into my peaceful life. 6 months later, construction was officially completed on my new regional fleet maintenance center, featuring 12 modern service bays, advanced diagnostic tools, and 20 full-time certified mechanics under my leadership. Lily Vance proved to be an exceptionally brilliant business partner, organizing our accounting systems and managing daily corporate logistics with incredible skill, grace, and genuine warmth toward our entire team. We developed a deep bond built on mutual trust and respect, often eating lunch together in the bright front office while discussing future business plans for community youth apprenticeship programs. Every weekend, Arthur Vance would drop by the garage in his vintage pickup truck, sitting on an oil drum with a mug of black coffee, chatting about cars and life. Looking back at that painful night in the parking lot, I realized that my dirty, grease-stained hands were never a mark of shame, but a badge of honest, noble work. The $60,000 I sacrificed for an ungrateful sister ultimately led me to true allies who valued honest integrity and character, far above shallow wealth and high society social status. I spent many years believing that family blood guaranteed loyalty, but life taught me that real family consists of those who stand by you when the rain falls the hardest. My garage sign now hangs proudly above the main highway entrance, glowing brightly every single evening as a beacon of hard work, resilience, and unyielding self-respect for all to see. I no longer carry the heavy weight of unearned guilt or bitter resentment, having found complete peace in knowing I did everything right as a devoted brother and honest man. Lily walked into my office yesterday holding a new expansion proposal for 3 additional service centers across the state, looking at me with proud, bright eyes full of endless optimism. We signed the new partnership papers together, officially sealing a bright future that was built not on deception or cruelty, but on honest labor, quiet courage, and unbreakable human dignity. I looked at my hands, still showing faint traces of engine oil beneath the skin, and smiled knowing they had built an empire while holding firm to my moral core. True dignity can never be stripped away by cruel words or arrogant laughter, because a personal life built on sacrifice and honesty will always withstand the storm and rise victorious. Standing tall in my modern facility alongside true friends, I finally knew that the hardest trial of my life had brought me exactly where I was always meant to be. 3 months after our new expansion opened, state prosecutors summoned me to the county courthouse to deliver formal testimony regarding Julian's fraudulent loan applications that originally triggered my shop's foreclosure notice. Walking into the crowded courtroom wearing my clean dark blazer, I saw Julian sitting at the defense table in a faded orange inmate jumpsuit, his once arrogant posture completely broken by months in holding. His mother sat 2 rows behind him in cheap department store clothes, clutching a crumpled tissue, while state investigators presented thick binders containing bank statements, proving systemic wire fraud and falsified tax records. When the assistant prosecutor called my name, I took the witness stand with quiet composure, answering every question truthfully about the $60,000 Julian forced Chloe to demand for their venue fee. I submitted the original bank mortgage papers alongside Julian's forged signature on the venue authorization form, proving he had knowingly used stolen equity from my business to secure private resort accommodations. Julian's defense attorney attempted to paint me as a bitter blue-collar brother seeking personal revenge, but the presiding judge cut him off sharply, noting that physical documentary evidence left zero room for speculation. As I stepped down from the wooden witness stand, I caught a glimpse of Chloe sitting alone in the gallery's back row, wearing a stained server shirt under her faded winter coat. Her eyes were swollen with heavy dark circles, and she held an old framed photograph of us as children, standing beside our late father's rusty green pickup truck in our driveway. She tried to approach me in the marble hallway during lunch recess, clutching the picture frame with shaking hands while whispering that she had finally realized how terribly she was manipulated by Julian. Chloe begged me to let her move into my spare bedroom, promising to clean the house and work at my garage counter without pay if I would only help her settle her debts. I stood beside Arthur's corporate attorney, looking at my sister with calm sorrow, pointing out that true repentance only came when her lavish lifestyle crashed and her wealthy promises vanished into dust. I reminded her that when I needed her voice the most, she chose Julian's arrogant status over 16 years of my quiet sacrifice, leaving me out in the cold without a second thought. I handed her a card for a reputable nonprofit debt counseling agency downtown, telling her that learning accountability was the greatest gift I could offer her as an older brother today. As she wept bitterly against the hallway wall, I turned around and walked back toward the courtroom doors, keeping my posture straight and refusing to let guilt derail my hard-earned peace. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, the jury returned a unanimous guilty verdict on all 12 counts of felony bank fraud, conspiracy, and grand larceny against Julian and his corporate firm. The judge sentenced Julian to 8 years in federal prison without parole, while ordering his family's remaining luxury real estate holdings seized immediately to pay restitution to defrauded local creditors. Julian was led away in handcuffs while his mother screamed hysterically at the cameras, marking the complete downfall of a family who believed wealth excused them from basic human decency. Leaving the courthouse behind, I drove my restored pickup truck back to our main facility, where Arthur Vance was waiting with his granddaughter Lily in our bright executive conference room. Arthur unfolded a large set of architectural blueprints across the mahogany table, revealing comprehensive plans for the Vance Vocational Academy, an endowed regional trade school designed to train young mechanics entirely for free. He proudly announced that his private charitable foundation was contributing $5 million in startup capital, but insisted that I serve as the permanent founding chairman and director of automotive education. Arthur looked me in the eyes, stating that young men and women who worked with their hands deserved proper honor, top-tier technical training, and an honest pathway out of poverty. Lily stepped forward warmly, opening her digital workspace folder to show 30 preliminary student enrollment applications from low-income high school graduates across Franklin County who had applied for full tuition scholarships. Looking at the names on those digital application screens, my heart swelled with deep emotion as I realized our painful ordeal was now transforming into a lasting educational legacy for hardworking kids. 6 months later, construction on the state-of-the-art vocational facility was officially completed right beside my main commercial repair center, featuring 6 modern engine diagnostic labs and 20 fully equipped hydraulic lifts. On official ribbon-cutting day, over 300 local community leaders, trade professionals, and proud working families gathered under bright blue skies to celebrate the grand opening of our nonprofit vocational academy. Arthur Vance took the podium first, sharing the story of how 5 years ago, an anonymous mechanic in a greasy canvas jacket cut his granddaughter out of a burning highway wreckage. He told the audience that quiet bravery and honest labor represented the true backbone of American strength, presenting me with a dedicated bronze plaque mounted near the main entrance doors. When I stepped up to address our first class of 40 eager students, I looked into their young, determined faces, seeing my own youthful struggles reflected in their hopeful eyes. I told them never to let anyone make them feel inferior for wearing work boots or having grease under their fingernails, because honest trade work builds real character and lasting honor. The crowd erupted into warm applause, and as I walked off the stage, Lily caught my hand, smiling with a quiet warmth that told me our journey together was just beginning. Over the following months, Lily and I grew inseparable, spending long hours managing our expanding fleet operations and holding evening mentoring sessions for students struggling with complex engine electrical systems. Her sharp business mind perfectly complemented my mechanical background, and for the first time in my life, I felt a deep, peaceful partnership based on mutual trust, shared values, and mutual respect. Meanwhile, word reached me through local news reports that Chloe had left her diner job after struggling to pay off high-interest credit card debt accumulated during her ill-fated wedding planning. She had moved into a small, rented studio apartment near the industrial district, taking a second job as an administrative clerk at a local auto parts warehouse to make ends meet. One rainy Tuesday evening, as I was locking up the shop office, I saw Chloe standing near the chain-link perimeter fence, clutching a small brown envelope in her wet hands. She did not attempt to yell or make a scene, but simply slipped the envelope through the office mail slot before walking quietly away into the heavy downpour without looking back. I walked over to the door and picked up the damp brown envelope, finding inside $50 in cash, alongside a heartfelt, handwritten letter addressed to me in Chloe's familiar, neat handwriting. In the letter, she wrote that she was paying back her first installment of the money I had sacrificed for her, admitting that working hard at 2 jobs had finally taught her what my hands went through. She explicitly stated that she did not expect forgiveness or financial help, but promised to send $50 every month until she paid back every single cent I had borrowed on her behalf. Reading her letter under the fluorescent office light, I felt a quiet sense of relief, seeing that rock bottom had finally forced my sister to grow into an accountable, grounded human being. I did not rush to call her or erase the past, but I deposited her $50 note into a separate bank account dedicated solely to funding her future emergency medical or living needs. I knew that personal healing always took time, and that true family reconciliation could only exist after years of proven, honest actions, not superficial, tearful apologies spoken in moments of sudden panic. A year after the ruined wedding, on a crisp autumn Saturday afternoon, Lily and I drove up to Greenlawn Cemetery in my pickup truck to visit my parents' gravesite. I carefully placed a fresh bouquet of yellow chrysanthemums on their polished headstone, wiping away fallen oak leaves while kneeling beside the cold granite marker in quiet, deeply reflective afternoon silence. I spoke softly to my late parents, telling them that despite all the hardships and painful betrayals, I had honored my promise to protect our family name with honesty and integrity. Lily knelt softly beside me on the grass, placing her warm hand gently over mine, letting me know that I was no longer carrying the heavy burdens of life alone on my shoulders. That evening, Arthur Vance invited us to Sunday dinner at his quiet home in Upper Arlington, a warm stone house filled with framed family photographs and books collected over 50 years. Sitting around the wooden dining table, Arthur raised his glass, offering a heartfelt toast to honest working people who build American communities without making noise or boasting about their good deeds. He officially announced that Lily and I were being granted equal 50% equity ownership shares in our expanded regional fleet maintenance company, solidifying our successful business and personal partnership permanently. 2 years after that terrible night in the luxury resort parking lot, Lily and I stood together on the back porch of our new house overlooking the quiet Scioto River Valley. The autumn sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and deep orange, reflecting off the clean, polished hood of my restored pickup truck parked down in the paved driveway below. Our commercial business now employed 32 full-time certified mechanics, paying competitive union wages, full healthcare benefits, and supporting 40 vocational students who were actively building better futures through our trade academy. I looked down at my hands resting on the porch railing, still showing subtle dark traces of motor oil deep within the skin that no industrial soap would ever completely erase. Lily softly reached out and interlaced her slender fingers with my rough, calloused hand, leaning her head gently against my left shoulder with absolute, genuine affection and unwavering personal trust. She whispered that my hands had saved her life on a freezing highway 5 years ago and had built an incredible sanctuary of hope for dozens of families across Columbus. I smiled in the quiet twilight, realizing that the grease on my skin was never a mark of poverty or shame, but the proud signature of an honest life well lived. Julian and his aristocratic family had sought high social status through arrogance, fraud, and empty posturing, only to lose everything they owned when legal truth and justice finally demanded their due. My younger sister Chloe had sacrificed genuine brotherly love for shallow financial luxury, only to discover that fake high society friends vanish the exact second money and status disappear into thin air. Yet through her hard monthly installments, I saw a tiny seed of real redemption beginning to take root in her heart, proving that pain can sometimes teach what comfort never could. Life had tested my resolve to the absolute limit on that wet ballroom floor, taking away my pride for a brief hour, only to return it multiplied 10 times over. I adjusted the collar of my jacket, feeling the cool evening breeze off the river, content in the knowledge that no storm could ever shake the foundation I had built. The dark days of poverty, emergency bank notices, and humiliating rejections were completely behind me, replaced by a thriving enterprise and people who loved me for who I truly was. Lily squeezed my calloused hand gently, asking what I was thinking about as the first stars began to appear one by one across the dark blue Ohio sky above us. I looked over at her bright, beautiful smile, feeling a profound sense of quiet gratitude for all the unexpected turns of human destiny that brought us together in this life. I told her I was thinking about how every single sacrifice, every late night under rusted car frames, and every tear shed in that cold truck was worth this exact moment. When you do what is right without asking for rewards, life has a funny way of delivering justice when you least expect it, turning your deepest pain into your greatest blessing. Arthur joined us on the porch, holding 2 cups of warm tea, nodding approvingly as he looked out across the peaceful valley towards the glowing lights of downtown Columbus in the distance. He said that true wealth is not measured by fancy titles or Swiss bank accounts, but by the lives you lift up and the unyielding dignity you maintain when trials test your soul. I took a deep breath of the crisp night air, feeling completely grounded in my purpose, knowing that our new vocational school would give hundreds of young workers a real fighting chance. No matter how hard the world tries to push you down or mock your humble beginnings, standing firm in your integrity will always pave the high road to lasting honor and victory. I pulled out the old silver key to my original small garage, holding it in my palm as a permanent reminder of where my long journey had started 16 short years ago. That tiny key had unlocked not just engine shop doors, but a lifetime of meaningful labor, unbreakable bonds, and the unwavering respect of people who valued truth above cheap vanity. Lily looked into my eyes, her hand resting softly over mine on the silver key, reminding me that the best chapters of our lives were still waiting to be written together. I wrapped my arm around her waist, watching the moonlight illuminate our quiet home, feeling a deep, unshakable peace that no betrayal could ever take away from my heart again. Standing there under the quiet Ohio sky, surrounded by genuine love, I knew that a man who stays true to his values will always find his way back to light and home.